Hey everyone, I have recorded a restorative yoga practice for you all today. And rather than have it be in a class format with the cueing and the whole class being recorded, I chose to break down the poses into the way to set them up and different variations for different restorative poses, because with restorative yoga the focus is on easing into the pose using a lot of props. So you want to have some blankets, bolsters, solid pillows like couch kind of pillows, yoga blocks, everything like that. If you don't have the yoga blocks or the bolsters, you can really just roll up blankets or towels and it can take the place of those. But the whole point of the restorative practice is to have a lot of support through props so that you can really feel ease and rest in these poses. So we aren't attempting to stretch as far as we can or do any vigorous movement. It really is about resting and relaxing. So we want to be switching into that parasympathetic nervous system state where we are resting and digesting and coming out of the fight or flight mode, the sympathetic nervous system state. So by holding the poses between really 3 to 10 minutes, you can hold them, especially if you're doing on each side. You might want to stop halfway through and switch sides for some of the poses, like the frog pose variation where we do both sides. You'll see that throughout the video, but it really is going at your own pace. Some people might want a lot more props and comfort. Some people might want less. Some people might want to be more elevated and keeping their head above their heart if there's any kind of dizziness or vertigo or blood pressure issues. So using more props to elevate the head in these poses. There's so many variations. I just went over a few for each pose. But restorative yoga is something that you really can do at home. Turn down the lights, put on some relaxing music, all of the things that put you into a relaxed state, and then have the props ready so that you can go into each of these poses and transition. You can add essential oils to the practice to be more relaxing. You can add a heating pad or just turn up the heat in the room warm, because you are holding the poses for a long time. So if your joints get uncomfortable, having that little bit of heat might really feel nice. And each pose I will kind of show you how to get into it and then maybe cue a few different breaths that you can try. So really focusing in on making this more of a meditative practice when you're in the pose, focusing just on the breath and observing your thoughts, witnessing what's going on. If it's hard to stay still for that long, maybe using a mantra, an affirmation, a prayer, listening to music that keeps you in a good headspace, whatever you need to do to hold those poses and feel comfortable with them. So I really hope you enjoy the practice. If you have any questions about any of the poses, you can leave it in the comments below and I will try to get back to you on that. And it's not the same as typical yoga that we think in a gym. So it really is a restful, restorative practice, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. So have a good time and be safe. So our first pose today is a supported child's pose. So with child's pose, we are looking to relieve tension throughout our back, our shoulders, our neck. This provides some light compression with our abdominal organs, and it can help lower blood pressure. It's a very calming and grounding pose. So we are folding forward in this pose, and a lot of times this pose can be uncomfortable for the knees, which is why we can place that blanket underneath our knees, between our hips and our heels. And we want to use a combination of pillows and blocks and cushions here to get that good angle. So underneath our chest, perhaps, being able to rest our head on the pillow, or showing some different variations. We might want to have the cushions start under our hips and then have more of an incline, which we're going to show now, which will allow a little bit more support and keeping our head above our heart. So this might be a little bit more comfortable if you want to have a little more of that support starting lower and extending up. Now you can have your face pointing forward, or it might be comfortable to turn the neck to either side. And so maybe spending the first 3 minutes of this pose with our head turned to the right hand side, and then just making sure that you're setting a timer and switching sides and turning your head to the other side when done on that side. Next, we are moving into reclining hero's pose. Hero's pose is a heart opener, and it can help with reducing fatigue or tiredness. Because it's a heart opener, we are opening up through the heart chakra. This pose without the support can be hard on the knees. So in this pose, we might want to put 1 or 2 blocks under the hips so that we're sitting on a block or even a large bolster, so there's less strain on our knees. And by adding the supports of blankets and props and pillows behind us, I'm choosing to use a chair for even more support. We take away the pressure of having all of that tension on our spine. So here I'm showing that variation of sitting on the blocks to ease any strain with the knees. And so again here, we're going to hold this pose for between 3 to 10 minutes. It really depends on your comfort level here. We feel fully supported, especially with that chair, or even if we want to put the pillows against a wall. And just taking deep breaths. So coming into a nice equal ratio breath or a 3-part breath here. Coming into supported frog pose. Frog pose can be really difficult and challenging for people. It's very intense on the hip flexors. So using bolsters, pillows, or props here can be really helpful in making this pose accessible. So I'm demonstrating just with bolsters. I have some pretty firm bolsters here. It provides enough support. And I would probably spend 3 or 4 minutes with my head to one side and then making sure with the other side to alternate. But I'm also giving the example if you put an extra bolster or 2 in the front or even an extra bolster under your hips. For me, this feels a little more comfortable to have more support. It lifts my hips more, so it takes some of that intensity out of the hip flexors in this stretch. I'm also going to give one other example here, and this is to, again, help if we have a lot of intensity, and it's just to do this pose on one side. And so you're just going to bring those bolsters off to the side, and we're going to leave, in this example, I'm leaving my left hip on the floor, and I'm just lifting my right leg and opening it to the side, and that's allowing me to get a less intense stretch. I'm still getting this frog pose stretch, but just on one side at a time. Moving into a supported forward fold, there's quite a few variations here. Forward folds are calming, they are grounding, they can help us find peace, and they're very restorative in their own right, but adding the support makes them easier to hold and sustain for a longer period of time. So here I'm using an example of just placing bolsters, pillows, or blankets on the legs and using that as support. Throughout using the props for a restorative pose like this, it allows us to lengthen the spine a little more because we have this added support. And we also want to make sure that we can place our arms either in front of us or off to the side. So I'm just demonstrating a place to rest your elbows in this pose. And this pose is really a great way to alleviate some of that pressure we might feel from sitting all day by having some of this forward flexion. Again, if we don't want to be leaning as far forward, using a block to elevate our chin, we want to keep a nice alignment, neutral alignment through our spine. It can be a little bit difficult to find that in this pose without using additional props like a chair, and so we're going to demonstrate this other option as well of using a chair if it is not accessible to lean as far forward. So if you have any kind of back pain or disc conditions where you're not advised to bend very far forward, this can be a really good use of the chair here. You can just have a very, very slight amount of spinal flexion, but you're very fully supported. And again, make sure you're checking in with a doctor or chiropractor to see if any of these poses are contraindicated for you. But in general, this can be another really good variation to access this pose of forward fold. So just taking nice deep breaths, whatever variation you choose. We're going to go ahead here and do another example, and here we're going to move into a straddle stretch. So by finding a different position for the legs, it can help to bring a different sensation in this pose. So just by opening up the legs to a wide straddle and then setting up our props in front of us, again, making sure that we have a slight elevation or ramp in our props, it helps us to maintain that neutral position in our spine. And so taking a nice deep breath and leaning forward over our props here, closing our eyes and just resting into the pose, settling into the pose, and again, holding it for a total of anywhere between 3 to 10 minutes. We can also turn our head to either side. Our arms can rest on our legs or in front of us. This has the added benefit in the straddle of also bringing a little more of a stretch to our hip flexors, as well as to our hamstrings and our lower back. So finding whatever variation feels the best for you today. Coming into supported butterfly pose. So in this pose, it can be really helpful to bring the props outside to either side of our knees, because we don't want, with holding this stretch as long as we do for a restorative practice, we don't want too much tension on our hip flexors. Butterfly pose is a really great stretch for the inner thighs, the hip flexors, and it improves circulation to our lower body, which can become very stagnant with sitting for long hours for work. And it is really good for feeling grounded and connected to the energies of the earth, because it is activating those lower chakras. So again, making sure we maintain a nice neutral position in our back by using our props, and just spending the time to use a nice deep breath, maybe centering in and becoming aware of where our breath is, and just taking that time to reflect on the sensations in our body. As always, setting a timer for each side, however long it feels good today. Next, we're coming into a supported lateral stretch. So this is going to be a very mild form of a lateral stretch. And this just means that we are stretching to the side of our body. We are opening up through our ribs. So by putting a folded blanket, bolster, or pillow under one side of our rib cage and at our waist, we are allowing the top part of our body and our top ribs and our other part of our waist to open up. This can be a really great stretch to focus on our breathing. So we are creating an expanding room through our rib cage to be more focused and aware of our breath. So any kind of lateral flexion is really good for the heart and lungs. It's said to stimulate the lymphatic system, to help our immune system. And again, how often during the day do we lose awareness of our breath? And so any kind of lateral movement where we are really focusing on creating space in the intercostals, in our ribs, in all of those muscles in our chest, it's really helping us to become more aware of breath patterns. So this can be a really great pose to work on our breath. Coming next into a supported fish pose. This is a good heart opener. We are opening up through the chest by creating support under our spine, and we are supporting through our cervical spine, through our neck. So our head is resting gently back, opening up through our throat as well. This pose is really good for opening up to our heart, opening up our communication. It allows for vulnerability, for trust, because we are becoming so open here. Really focusing on deep breath through our chest. We're going to transition into a supported bridge pose. So bridge pose can be really good for enhancing our energy, reducing fatigue. We are opening up through the chest. It's helping with even tension headaches, since our head is lower than our heart in this pose, and we are helping the blood flow to come upward. And there are different variations here. I'm choosing to use a block under my hips, but it might be more comfortable for some to use a blanket or a bolster, maybe a little bit less. We can also come into a legs up the wall variation. So this again helps to drain fluid from the legs. This is bringing more blood flow to our heart. And again, this is a really good pose for helping with fatigue. So again, you could also come up to a wall and just put your legs up against the wall here, but just to add some variations with the props, we'll do it this way. Coming into Mountain Brook pose. So this is a pose that is in the book Relax and Renew by Judith Lassiter. It's also in the Yoga Fit restorative training that I took as a yoga teacher, and it's just a really nice supported pose. So you're going to use a lot of different props here. We are going to position a blanket that's rolled up right at the neck to provide support for our cervical spine. We can use either bolsters or blankets under our chest for a slight heart opener, and then an additional bolster or blanket under our knees so that we have that support for our lower back, so our lower back isn't strained. So finding whatever position feels best, we can also put a weighted eye pillow on our eyes. That might feel like a really nice way of relaxing. And this is a great pose for final relaxation for the end of a class. So it's opening our chest. It's helping with our breathing, becoming aware of our breathing. We're going to work on allowing for rest and relaxation here. And we feel very supported, fully supported by our props. We can envision feeling supported by the earth. It's a really great pose for just checking in at the end of a class or after a really busy day. And we're putting our body into really awesome alignment. So we're allowing that little bit of expansion with our chest. We're supporting under our legs and just taking that time to rest. Thank you for taking the time to practice with me today. I hope this allowed some rest and relaxation for you.